everybody, David here. All right, today we have a big test for you guys. It's going to be really tough, but you have to do this. And this is one of those lessons that I teach that really is going to help you a lot this week. This is one thing last week. A lot of you didn't do exactly the soft edges, so this week we are going to go full board, wet into wet, soft edges. I'm so happy to do this. This is one of those lessons I had given a long time ago, and I really enjoyed doing it because I think it really helps you out a lot. And so we had fun this afternoon. I didn't do it as perfect as I like to, but again, always the first time I do it, it's not always as good as the other times. So let me see what we have here. So today I had a variety pack. I got of that hard cider, and look at how bright it is here. It's so bright you can't even see it. Star Cut Ciders Pulsar Dry Cider, made from Pinot Noir yeast. So we're going to see. We're going with the cider because I didn't get a chance to get another beer somewhere, so it's a cider. I still have to find a good place where I can buy them by single can, so I don't have to buy a whole six-pack of all the drinks. All right, so cheers, everybody. Cheers to a wet into wet. Teaching how to do wet into wet today. Tastes like champagne. Cheers! It's a champagne. Look at it, even sparkling, bubbly. All right, so I'm gonna give that a 9. Not a big it's like champagne, but about a 9. It's kind of dry. And so let's go on. So what we did this afternoon, let me just show you really quickly. We did this. There we go. And so all wet into wet, though I put some people in later on, and I also when I got home and I this part here I wrote it out a little bit, but we're gonna get a little bit darker, and I explained a few things that I don't think I did actually today, and so we'll get to that. All right, and so let me just go really quickly and see who's all here. And we have Dawn, Barbie, Barbara. Oh my gosh, look at how many people are here. I better not say them all because there's so many. Wow, awesome. And so this is a really, really, really important one. And let me just explain to you again. Let me go first to website. So I've been working on my website, and we're going to be changing more than this, but this is just a start. I'm changing things around a little bit, so you can find my paint-alongs right in the beginning, right up here. So you can actually go to my website and follow right from it's sort of the link right there. You just press that, and you go right to and that's BeckerArt.net or davidartbecker.com, and there's a bunch of stuff on there. We're going to be doing it all new and trying to get a few more things in there. And so please subscribe and have your friends subscribe, because it is kind of fun to have everybody in here and learning away. Here's my supplies and Holbein. We got Holbein, of course, and we have my brushes, and we are not using any transfer paper or masking fluid today, but we are using the Stonehenge Aqua cold press 300 pound. All right, so let's go to our value study real quickly so we can get going here. So let me just show you how I made this pretty dark. If you look right up here, I made it kind of dark, the picture, in black and white, to show you that middle tones like the blue around here, see all the blue and the light parts that look light, and even the mountain and this little hill up in front here, or the hill back there, is pretty much in your darks. Even though middle tones, like I always say, I try to make everything black and white. I didn't make this black and white, but I made it very dark to show you that all the stuff besides the sun and a few lights in here and the light sky and some of the light water, that's the only light. Everything else is all the land pretty much is your dark pattern. So the lights will go from light to dark, and again, I always try to make you think of it as black and white. Even though this is like a middle tone in the light area, and this is a middle tone in the dark area. So get yourself a pattern. It has to be a pattern, and I'm talking a big pattern. A lot of artists do 3 values. I don't do the 3 value thing. I just do 2, because I know now if I keep all these little lights right here, all the little lights, the sun and this little reflection, if I only had that 1 value and that's all light and everything else dark, not just darker than this light, I'm going to have a good composition, because it works. It works when I make it this dark and that light. So when you're composing your work, look for things like that. Look for dark and light, black and white, basically. All right, and so that's what we're going to be doing. And then go to our tabletop to show you what I did wrong. So if you look at this picture, look at the difference between this image right here and this image right here. You notice I didn't get dark enough. These are so light, right? And it's so light, but it's going to be a problem, and that's the problem is that I'm working wet into wet and wet into wet. Everything was wet into wet. The sky was wet into wet. The mountains are wet into wet. Everything is wet into wet. The only thing that was not wet into wet when I got home, I put the people in, and that was not wet into wet. And the little kayaks I put in there, I just decided to put that in there because it's kind of a boring picture in a way because it's more about trying to get you to learn how to do wet into wet and work everything soft edged. This is whole painting. I want to be soft edged, and then later on, if you want to put the people in, I will put some people in to show you that afterwards. Even this hill right here is soft edged. Everything was soft edged. Everything is done wet into wet. If you want to soak your paper into the water and then just pull it out and then start that way, you can do that too. If you're using 140, you can do that, soak it, and then plop it on a piece of plexiglass so it stays nice and wet. I did bring my mister this time because I'm going to have to probably mist it a little bit to keep it wet. So I don't ever want it to dry. I do not want it to dry because I want to get all soft edges. So I want to see this to be done, okay guys? I want the whole painting to be soft edge except for maybe right in the center of interest. All right, and so let's get going here. This is your challenge. This is a challenge, guys. I know it's a challenge, but it will teach you how to work wet into wet. And like many of you last week didn't do your background soft edged. You made it hard edged. You kept the contrast down, which is another way of doing it. But I just want you to learn how to work that medium, how to learn and work this medium and put it into a wet wash and get edges. Like these clouds, you can just get those in one wash. Now, what I've got to do this time compared to what I did here is I just have to make my pattern, my value pattern. I wasn't worrying so much about my value pattern. And so this is what happens, and you don't get a nice value pattern. It wasn't that dark enough. The lights and darks are so close that the pattern it doesn't really exist. I mean, I have darks and lights all over the place. And really, you have to make this area right here the light, the only light. And the sky back here is okay. But then all these other parts have to be a little bit darker than that so that it doesn't go back and forth all over the place. So it's not a great composition because of the light and dark pattern. But we weren't worrying about that. And I'd rather, even if you don't get the right pattern, that's fine, as long as you make everything soft-edged. I don't want any hard edges, remember. All right, so Evelyn says, yes, it's going to be a challenge, but please do it. Don't give me, if you see any, I was telling my class, if I saw any soft edges or hard edges in the class, I would go around with my sprayer and just spray it. And so, make it always wet. Don't work any dry areas, okay? So this is the challenge. And don't show me any hard edges. I want to see hard edges, let me tell you. Because then I'll be very disappointed. I just want to see you be able to do this whole painting soft edge. And I'll show you ways of when it starts getting dry, that you can wet it, re-wet it, and you can do it again and again and again. But so what I do is I wet the paper all just with water. You can spray it too. I can spray it with the mister, just spray it all across like this. And I don't shoot it. I kind of let it, I go like this and then let it fall down and go over, like just go over and fall down on it. And so then when you're spraying it though, I'm going to take my brush and let it soak into the paper a little bit. Don't go right away. Let it soak in a little bit. Oh my gosh, I hope this is not, one of these had alcohol in it. That would not be a good thing because I hope that's not what it was. It looks like it's puddling though. Uh-oh. Hopefully that's not what it was. Okay, here we go. All right, so now we're going to get our lights done first. So always the lights, that part doesn't change, so get your lights in there. If also, what you may want to do is put a little bit of masking fluid down for you where you want the sun to be, like white. So I can do that, but I'm just going to start out with a little bit going around the light, going around the sun, with a little bit of yellow. This is Hansa yellow. And then I'm just going to go from there. And so I'm doing kind of small area. I know it's kind of small, but it's going to go from a light to a dark. And I just have to capture this a little bit. And so it'll be fine. I'll be getting bigger and bigger. But there's not much light there. So, I just put new stuff in. So I just dipped it into it. I actually don't like putting brand new, because then it's not dry enough. Whole pen is really nice because it gives you when it's super, I just put a bunch of new stuff in. It's almost too wet for me. Then I'm taking up too much paint, and so I'm going. Now this is all wet. Remember, this is all wet, It will be wet the whole entire time I'm painting. And so I'm never going to let it dry. And I want you to do the same. I want you to have it wet the whole time you're working. And this will very much help you in learning how to work wet into wet and not putting any hard edges into your work. This is how to get soft edges, is working wet into wet, because it will not give you a hard edge. It will give you a harder edge. You can get a pretty hard edge with enough pigment. You'll see as I go along. So I'm going in here. I mean, look at it. Even here it has a little bit of an edge, right? You can still get edges, but they're just not going to be super, super hard, like if it's dry. How do you know when it is wet enough? I seem to always get dry too soon. We'll just keep on spraying it. It has to have a sheen, and the sheen looks very, when I'm looking at it from the side, I can always see that it's very equally wet. And if I start seeing it where it's like I'm losing the sheen, make sure you let it spray it, you know. And again, it's practice spraying, because you can be too close, you can be too far. It's like a certain area, and then because if I go at certain times, what happens is it'll give me little dots, which I'm actually getting. I'm not sure about that sprayer. I'm not sure if that's water. That water's making me dots on here. Oh, I'm not sure why. Anyways, let's just go keep on going here, and then we go from a yellow. I'm going to take a little bit of light blue. Take a little bit of light blue first, because there is a little bit of light blue, and it makes it kind of greenish, which is okay. A lot of you guys get scared that there's green in your sky. There is a lot of green in the sky. There's a big area of green, light green, that before the blue starts. Before the blue gets in there, it gets pretty green. And so then I'm going to take the blue, and you notice I'm going light to dark, and I'm using my smaller brush because I am kind of drawing with my brush. And so, and also remember, we're working wet and wet. What does that mean? It's going to get about 30% lighter. So really push the pigment, because the more pigment you put down, the less it will dry light. The more pigment covers up the white, right? And so the thicker the pigment, the more it's going to be staying with the light, with the darks that you're putting down. Now you notice that I just went over some of these small clouds, which is fine, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out some of those little light areas, because they're pink, right? So I'm going to go right into my pink, or red. Just take red with a lot of water. Take red, and if you have like opera, you can even put opera in there for some of the light reds in there. And I'm going to put it in with a lot of water, because it'll separate. I mean, there's a lot of water there, but it's going to separate out a little bit. So don't be afraid of putting water on top of water. It'll separate it out, and it'll make it it won't make a watermark, because it's all wet. And it'll just push that little bit of wetness away. So this is very important to learn. You have to learn how to work wet into wet, because there's so many things that you learn by working wet and wet. Everything will be soft edged. You'll know how much pigment to put in, how much pigment to leave out. It's so important to learn this. I really think that's how I'm doing this. And it's not a great composition, but don't even worry about that. Just worry about learning how to get the soft edges. I really want you to learn that all of this is soft edged, and just go in there. And I'm not putting any white in here yet. I'm just putting water. Water and water just separates the pigment out a little bit. So you're pushing away the pigment in like that blue area with the light, and now I'm going to put the darker blue back in. So now I'll put the darker blue back in here, right? Because this time I want to capture a little bit more of the dark blue, which I didn't in the last one. It got a little bit too light. And I gotta spray it because it's starting to get dry. So again, really lightly, really quickly, keep it wet, keep it wet, keep it wet. Where are you spraying their artwork or the students? Where are you? Hey Maria. No, I was telling them if they didn't do it, if I started seeing it dry, I would just spray their painting. I would make it wet again, but not everybody did a good job. Everybody kept it wet, because I would not let them do it wet. They had to do it wet. I did not let them have a option of letting it dry. I walked around constantly saying, you know, it's getting too dry. It's getting too dry, because if it gets too dry, you cannot get these soft edges. And you have a long time, really, a lot longer than you think. And again, make it 20% darker than you think it's going to be, because It has to look wrong to be right. If you don't make it dark enough, it's going to just lighten up way, way, way too much. So use enough pigment, because pigment is what covers up the white. The amount of pigment covers up the white, and if you don't have that much pigment, and it looks, when it's wet, it always looks 20% darker. And so once it dries, it's what pigment you have left there. And you notice I have everything wet evenly, but it doesn't matter if I'm not working on this side or that side. Everything has got to be evenly wet. And so I'm going to, and I want to work the darks on top of that. The dark clouds are going to go on top of all the blue here. So I just go right through. And so now I'm going to take my bigger brush, because I got to get a bigger area. I got to use a lot of paint. I'm just going to go in here now and just get a lot of paint in there. This is scary because you're going to be using a lot of paint, and you have to have fresh paint. This also shows me if you have enough fresh paint out. If you don't have enough fresh paint out and you're doing more of a tint, then you're not going to be able to get this. You will not be able to get this with tints of color. You can't get your darks with tints of color, with small tints of color. You have to really go in there with a lot of paint to make it darker. 20% darker, actually 30%, I would say. We had a lady this morning, Bonnie, I forget what her last name was. She gave a demonstration for our club, and she said 40%. She was saying that her stuff gets 40% lighter. And so I can kind of see that sometimes. It does get pretty light. And so I'm going in here, and see how everything's wet? Everything's wet. Isn't that gorgeous? Isn't that fun to just get all that paint and just let it get wet? And the wetter it is, though, if you have it too wet, it's just going to bleed all, and you're going to lose all these edges. All these little lights, you're going to lose those. So it's a little bit of, just constantly working it back and forth, and knowing how much pigment you need to put down to let it only bleed so far, how dark it is going to get so light. It's just practice, and practice makes perfect, right? So just keep on practicing it. You'll get it. You'll get it. And the students did really well today. I'm going to go right into this little hill up here, because the snow on this hill is going to be darker. I'm going to go right into that, leaving my lights alone down here. Now this down here is going to get a little bit light. And so just don't make it too wet while you're doing that spray, because only one spray like that is enough to keep it wet. So now I'm going to go back in with my pink, because I'm losing some of the lights. So again, I'm going to put a lot of water. There's a lot of water on there, but I can push the dark pigment around by putting a little bit of light pigment right on top of there. And a little bit of water, I can get these little lights back, because I'm just pushing. Water is going to push away the darker pigment, right? So I'm putting water down, and it's pushing away the pigment, because pigment, or water, pushes pigment. It just pushes it around. So I can just go in there and grab that back. But I do want to put a color in there, so right away I pick up a color and throw it into that water. Just throw it into that water that you just put down, because you can get your lights back by just throwing water into the wash of water that's already there. It's just a little bit more wet, and then you can go in here and get this light. And all this is going to get all darker. And now this is where the sun is. The brightest part is going to be right here, so this is not dark enough. So I'm going to put this in here. And this is going to be a big cloud going through there too, right? The big ominous cloud there is going to be really dark. And that almost looks like it's black in there, but I'm not going to use black. I think that's just too ugly to use black. So I'm going to use, I'll use a violet, a permanent violet. Maybe a little bit of this brown here even, a little purple brown, imidazolone brown. A little bit of lavender put in there, kind of make it a little bit more opaque. And now I'm going to go in here, and I know it looks very dark, right? I mean, it looks very, but that's okay, because it will lighten up a lot. A lot. It's very wet. My surface is very wet. And I constantly look to make sure that there's not one area that's going to be a little bit lighter than another, or a little bit drier than another. It has to be even. You have to go through the even, so you know how much pigment to put down. So you just go in there. And see how I'm getting lines? It's just that I'm putting more pigment down, and the wetness happens all on its own. You have to use enough pigment so it's thick enough that you stop it from running too far. That's what makes it stop from running, by you. Put a little bit more purple in here, a little bit more light. And so this is pretty thick. If you look at that, that's very thick, hardly any water. But there's a lot of water here, so I can go down and then just plop it in there. And look how it goes down really dark, but then it spreads out, and it kind of gets lighter and lighter as it goes along. And it's thick. I must say, it is very thick. Not so thick that it's not bleeding, though. So it's a really fine line there. You have to really watch it. I'll put a little bit of blue in there too. Put a little blue into that mix. And I like this little part where it's like lit up a little bit here and there. You got little lines over here. I know it looks really dark, right? Right. It looks really dark, but I'd rather have it darker, too dark in the very beginning here while it's wet, because I don't want to go back in and dark on top of it. It just doesn't look as fresh. You want to go in with nice fresh washes, wet into wet. And as it goes back, as it goes to the background back here, I want to get it a little bit lighter. The clouds will be a little bit lighter. And I'm pushing it, I am kind of blending it, but it's blending itself, it's softening up on all on its own, because, again, why? Because it's wet. How many times can I say wet tonight? Cheers, guys, cheers. Wow, that's like champagne. Doesn't taste like a cider, it tastes like champagne. All right, so we're gonna go up here again. Any questions? Boy, where are you spraying there? I also have trouble with wet, dry amounts. I purchased paper going through your website first to Amazon. Do you get credit for it? Yes, I do. Thank you so much, Patty. Yes, definitely. Anything you buy, if you go through my website and go to Amazon through my website, it doesn't matter what you buy, I will get a little credit. So I really thank you for doing that. Yeah, just go. I do it myself. I even get credit if I go myself. So I always start on my website first. And I even have a search engine in my website where I can look for a product. If you look there in my website, I have a search product little bar there. You just type in what you're looking for, and then it'll take you there. Now this is starting to get dry again. Uh-oh, hurry up. Oh. There we go. Just one wash like that, one spray like that is enough. These sprayers spray out a lot of water, so you have to really watch. It's enough. You know, you don't have to put a lot in there. And so now I'm going to take some pure orange. Pretty thick pure orange. Again, be wary of how much paint you want, because you do want a lot of paint. Not so thick that it clumps up like oils, but enough that it's going to bleed. I mean, you have to have enough that it bleeds and covers up your white. Look at this. I'm almost using pure orange. Almost using pure orange here to get some of these really bright clouds. And you'll watch when it's dry. You remember how dark that was? But look how it's all just going down in value, right? It's really hard. That is, I must say, that is, for myself included, is the hardest thing to think, because you're making it look wrong, but it's like way overdone. But then when it dries, it's like perfect. So that is a very hard thing to do, but you have to keep on practicing. Now these clouds down here have this little bit of orange on the outer edge. So it starts out on the outer edge because the outer edge is getting the orange, right? And then it gets darker. And right here, right by the sun, it is dark, but I'm going to shift it off a little bit. I'm going to make it orange right there. I'm going to make that part of the cloud orange right in front of it. Like it's burning it. It's burning really dark right there. Really warm. And then it goes out this way. Again, all soft edged, all soft edged. Isn't that great? And it's so much fun just to make it soft edged. One thing about watercolor I love is the ability to do that, and where it's making its own edge. Like I didn't do any of these soft edges. They're just all happening on their own because it's wet into wet. And it looks so watercolor-like. It's just the most wonderful thing about watercolor is letting it do its own thing and getting its own soft edges. Here and on here, get a little bit of orange on the outer edges of the clouds. I will put some orange in there because it's going to be, that's the way it is. It's like surrounded by the warmth because the sun is behind it. And then you got this light right here. And I didn't get exactly like the picture. This is kind of darker down here. But you don't have to get it exactly like the picture. You can just make it close to it. That's fine. Here I'm using lilac, which is like a pinkish purple. And put that in there too. So you're just going to put that in. And these are all opaque colors. I like that. I like the opaque colors because I'm using it wet into wet. They're very transparent. They just happen to be very pastel-like, and I love that. I don't mind that at all. Here, look at that lilac. Lilac with a little bit of orange. And you wet it. Look how beautiful that color is. I mean, it's going to be a beautiful color in there. And you make it thick enough so it floats through. And that'll be fine because then you get a really nice look. A really beautiful look. It's starting to dry again. Boom, one shot. Boom, there you go. That's it. That's all you need to do. Keeps it wet. Keeps it nice and wet. Are you using 300-pound because of wetness? Yes, I am. If you do this on 140, you have to soak the back because otherwise you're going to just get ripples all over the place. And the bigger your paper is, the worse it's going to be. So yes, if you are using 140, please wet the back and the front and soak it just really, really wet. It gives you more time then, you know, because I mean, you have to spend a lot of time because you got to get this painting done. There's no going back. You can, like on this other thing I'm going to show you, I am going to go on that older painting and show you, if I have enough time here, to how I would go the second and third wash when it's dry. Because you can let this dry and re-wet the whole thing again, which I'll do on the other painting and show you. So a little bit more darks up here. And look at how much time I can go right into this still. Wasn't there before. If I want to get some lights back in here, I can do that too. I can pull it out. As long as things are wet, you're good to go. You can do whatever you want because it's all just floating. And you notice I'm not going back and forth and doing a lot of thing. I'm just kind of dabbing it in and letting it just bleed. And the more of a line I want, the more pigment I'll use. See, like this, I want a little bit more pigment, and so I'm making more of a line. Because I'm going to make this mountain, I'm going to re-wet that, and I'm going to make that mountain with soft edges. Like I said, everything on this painting is going to be soft edge. There will be no hard edges through the process. And I want you to do the same. I don't want you to do any hard edges. Hi David, it's Molly from CPSA. Where did you get the palette you're using? Oh, so the palette I'm using is a Holbein palette, but the same company must make all these palettes. They're just those cheap plastic palettes, and so there's nothing special on them. Yeah, it's just a cheap plastic one with this many things. I think Richardson makes it. Cheap Joe makes one like that. They're all just plastic. The plastic form is all pretty much the same. It just happens to be a Holbein one, and I'm sure they all made by the same company. Now here, what I'm going to do is wet the whole surface here, wet the whole ground here, and I have a blue in my brush. Oh well, it's just a little bit of blue. My water's pretty dirty, and so I'm just going over everything. Now everything is wet again. So look at that, everything's wet again. And this is going to be very hard for you, I know, but give it a shot, and let me know how it goes too, because what was the problem? Did you have it too wet and not wet enough? Did you find that it was getting too dry too quickly? All those things, just write them down, and so that when you come back and ask questions, I can pretty much answer what's probably going to happen. Because it is kind of hard. It is a little bit difficult because you cannot get hard edges. You cannot get hard edges which I don't want you to. I want you to go right through here, and see I'm just laying down some color, and I can lay it down enough so that it's not bleeding all over, but it's still, I'm just putting a little light color in there at first, and I'll get darker, just like I do everything else. I go light to dark. It's just that I'm doing it with all soft edges. And when I say soft edges, they're just blurry edges, and some of them are harder than others. Like these cloud edges are getting pretty hard. And even though I may have not gotten exactly what I wanted, I can still go back in. I can't anymore up here. Now this is too dry now. If I were to spray this when it gets damp, I waited too long now, and I don't know if you can tell, but I lost the sheen. Even if just a little bit of sheen, there you go. See how I lost the sheen? There's not as, like in the corner up here, up there in the corner, see how wet that is? That's still wet. But the rest of it, there's spots of lightened wetness and dryness, and you cannot go into those areas then. You have to stop. And you don't even want to spray it, because when you spray it, you'll pick up the paint. And so if it's all wet all at the same time, where it's always wet and it's staying wet at the level, now it's too different. And so if I put too much water in there, you're going to get marks all over that. And that's like if I were to take my fingers, put it in the water, and spatter it all over, I get little dots everywhere because it's damp, and dampness will ruin it. Once it's damp, it has to be wet, evenly wet to do your washes. So that sky is as far as I can take it right now. I can go back in while it's wet, or later on when it's dry and re-wet it, but not until that time. So I am going to wet this mountain here still, and I'm going to show you that I'll get a little bit of that in there. And so what I'm going to do there is take a lot of paint, thick paint, and right away get the thickness. So if you're using, again, if you're using 140, it's going to wrinkle if you don't wet the back and kind of stick it onto a board. You don't want to tape it. If you got 140, don't tape 140 because you want it to be wet on the back on both sides so it lays flat. Now see, that's a soft edge, but look at, I didn't use enough paint, so it's going to keep on bleeding into that area. So I want to get it really nice and dark, thick, and so I can get a little bit of, it's still soft because this is wet, but it's really thick amount of paint, so it's going to stay pretty. Also, depending on how thick and how dark it is, the darker this color is, the darker the value is, the more that's going to look like a hard edge line. Because if I have a soft edge line there, or a hard edge line there, if I have a soft edge line there that's really light against the background, it's going to look light, it's going to look soft. But if I have this is going to look harder because it's more contrast. So more contrast will make it look harder edged, even though it's not. It's still a soft edge, but the darker it is, the more contrast will give it, making it look a little bit more hard edged. So if you want to make something look harder edged, then also make it darker too. Make it more contrasty. If you want to make it less, let's say it's a hard edge and you made it soft, then it would look like a soft edge, even though it's hard edged. It's all about values, value pattern, and then also what it's up against. Right now this looks pretty hard, right? That edge looks pretty hard, though it's very soft edged, but because it's dark and it's contrasty, it will look harder. So then right away I will go and do my, how much time do we have here? Okay, we got plenty of time. So down here I will do my water right away, and I will just do the waves of the water. Again, it's all wet, and I gotta spray it because it's starting to get damp. Don't let it get damp. Don't let it get damp. It has to be evenly wet. And so hey Ann, coming in late. I got an answer for your Ann. You had asked about my Saturday classes, and if you come there, my Saturday classes are they're not like my Thursday class where we all paint the same thing. Everybody's at their own level, and so they're all painting their own thing. But if you come in, I can give you something to paint. Your daughter, if she wants to paint something, I can give her a lesson, or if you bring something yourself that you want to paint, I can help you out with that. That's usually what happens on Saturday. Is everybody's got their own, they bring in their own things. Now it's for the first time. I usually, if you come into my class for the first time on a Saturday morning, for the first time I give you something to do, and we don't work we work from our imagination on that day, because I just want you to see how well you do your watercolors. And you don't have to ever bring anything. If the first time you don't have to bring anything. After that, then you can bring, if you've been there before and you want your daughter to work on something, you can do that too. Just bring whatever you want her to work on. And so here we're going with the blue now, and see how it's all still wet, also soft. I'm going to pick up these colors down here. I will also answer you that email, Anne. Do I ever do Zoom classes? No, I don't. I did one and I liked it a lot, but I just don't have much time. But I would like to try it. So yeah, keep the lookout for Zoom classes. I will try to get some in there, because I know it's, for some people, it's the only way they can get into my classes. So I'm going to try to do maybe some of them in the near future. Here I'm reflecting what's above, right? And it's also soft. It's all still soft. Now, to give you a good idea of that, if you do give me hard edges, I really don't show me any hard edges. I want to see something, because if you show me hard edges, I'm going to say something about it. This is a challenge. Please try to do it all soft edge. And if you get to a point where it's too wet or whatever, and you're really screwing it up, just keep on going. Just try it and show me what you did, and it's fine, because this is harder, but learning this is so important. Learning how to use the wet into wet will just really help you so much in the long run. Because you can, anytime there's an area that you're working on, you find that you don't know what it is, or it's like it's messing you up and you're not quite sure what to do, or you don't know what the object is, you want to blur it. This is a great way of blurring areas. The only thing I also said to my students is that for the rocks up here, those are I'm going to scrape out. And so I will show you how to scrape those out. And that's the only hard edges you're going to have on there. I'm going to use my, what do you call these things? We're going to use that to, oh my gosh, I can't believe my gosh, I'm getting old. Palette knife. The palette knife. I'm using the palette knife. Wow. Can't believe I forgot the name of a palette knife. Too many things on my head. Okay, so always look at the color what's above it in water. That's the same color right up there, right? I'm just going in here, making the waves. And some of these waves are, and when I'm doing water, I'm always working back and forth. And depending on how much waves there are in this, you're going to do it back and forth. I always do all my water back and forth horizontally. And I'm picking up the color that's there. I'm just copying what's above and bringing it down here. And look at how nice and thick this is. Look at how thick. I rarely use water in my brush when I'm working wet and wet like this because it's already down here. It's already nicely evenly spread. One shot. Every once in a while I go with the mister. And get yourself a mister. It's better than the sprayer. You don't want to spray, you don't want to put dots on it. You just want to put a little mist of a layer of water to keep you going. And again, don't go back and forth and spray a lot of it because it's just enough to make it still not damp. It's wet. It'll still keep it wet. Damp and wet are two different things. Damp is not, you can't do anything in dampness. You got to go in when it's wet and evenly wet. So important that it has to be evenly wet, and that way I can use big, thick paints like this. I can go in there and just use the paint thick. Now I'm not sure. Okay, that's that. And then I'm going to get the blue. Now I'm going to do the water, or the rocks down here. And so far you can see, right? See, everything is soft edge, no hard edges, but there are edges, so you can still tell what things are, right? You can still tell that this is a hill back here. And later on, when this is dry, I can put the hard edge stuff in there. But let me put the shoreline here, because again, I want to do it first. First, I want to do it with soft edges. And this is just a great way of practicing. Wet into wet. It's so good for you. I'm so excited about this. I hope you guys do this, because I will make fun of you if you don't. I call it delay timers. Palette knife. Oh, thanks. Palette knife. I will get a mister like that. You can go to Amazon, get a mister. It's called mist. It's a mister, not a sprayer, or it's a spray mister, or mister sprayer, mist sprayer, mist sprayer. I think they call them. Okay, so there's the edge. Look at that. I'm putting some edges in there. They're all still soft though. See how it's still soft? It's still darker. I'm drawing little areas of that hill. It's all soft edge. And how do you get an edge? You just thicker paint. Thicker paint. Not the value. You're going to see it. If the value is darker, then you see it as sharper. Even though it's still soft, you'll see it sharper. And though you have to make sure you have enough water in there so that it doesn't bleed all over the place. And it'll be a very big problem for those of you that don't have a lot of paint on your palette. If you don't have fresh paint on your palette, this is going to be so hard for you. This will be very, very hard because you really have to have a lot of paint, and it's got to be thick, and you've got to be able to stop the paint from running all over, because if there's too much water, it's going to bleed all over the place. Now look at how much paint I put on there. It's still wet though, so that's cool. I can go in there. Now I'm not using it so thick that it's squash. I'm not using it like oils. I'm not using it like acrylics. It's still floating. I'm just using the amount of paint compared to the water that's there. I just use enough so that it floats a little bit and still floats and blends itself, gives itself a soft edge. Now this whole front here I'm going to make warm. I'm going to make that warm so it comes forward. I will still have some cool parts in there, you know, to reflect, because most of these rocks are kind of reflecting if they're wet, they're going to reflect some of the water in the sky. So now I'm going to go in here. I'm not sure why I'm using my small flat. I'll use my big flat because that's a big area. I always like to use a bigger brush for bigger areas. But use the brush that you best feel comfortable with. You got to use brushes that you really feel comfortable with being able to cover the area fast enough so that you don't waste too much time. You got to be able to, it's still wet. Though if you watch it with the mister, you'll have a lot of time. I mean, look at I've been working now almost an hour, and it's still the top part is finally dry. That's pretty dry. This is still this whole bottom is still very wet, very very wet, and I would need it that way. I mean, I'm not done with it, so I have to go in there and just keep it working, keep it working. Now the people I will not put in because I need them. Well, actually, I will because it's going to be dry by that time, so I can put them in. And look at how it's really dark color, but look at all the colors I can put in there. I can just float all these colors in there. And try to think to yourself that when you put it down, you're done. Don't try to think that you're going to go back after the next wash. You want to get this, like this rock is done. When I get done with this, that is done. No more going back in. Though you can, and you will be able to when it's dry and you get hard edges in there, because maybe you do want some hard edges in there. But just think of it as like you're done with this. You don't want to go back in. Look at how I'm picking up all this pure pigment and just floating it in there, and it floats and gives you all these beautiful little, look at those edges and stuff. Isn't that great? Oh, this is so wonderful. I hope you guys learn it. I just really hope that this gets through and you really try it. I can't tell you how important learning how to do this, because I feel it's one of those things in your arsenal that you'll be able to do that not many artists do. Many of, as I could see that last week when we were doing the background of the blossoms, that a lot of you made the branches hard edged, and I really, if you can make them soft edged, it makes it that much easier and that much better out of focus. You can make things out of focus, which is what you want. Ginger asks, your paintings all seem to be a quarter sheet. Yes, they are. So that's about 11 by 15, and so I use 16 by 20, and I get a mat, and depending on the size, but you can, the mats are, the mat opening, but figure out the mat opening, but usually the outside can be 16 by 20 frame is usually the quarter sheets, and then just cut the mat to the size of the opening of the, usually it's 11 by 14, or 10 by 14, you can do the opening, and that's usually a pretty decent size. But definitely a 16 by 20 frame. Unless it's a really thick frame. If it's a really thick frame, then it kind of is too big. So it depends on what size your frame is. If you have a matte, more of a watercolor frame where it's not really, really wide, so then you want to maybe just do 11 by 14 or 14 by 18. 14 by 18 is next size down if it's a wide frame. So look at all this, all soft edged. Isn't that just, and look at how I'm getting all these lines. Look at all those lines. Look at how it's all soft edged. There's no hard edges. It's still all wet. It's wet into wet. You get a lot of beautiful edges, and if I want to scrape away, I need more pigment. And I really don't need to scrape away. I mean, it looks fine, but I just want to show you how to scrape away back down to the paper to get maybe the edges light and also hard. So I'll show you with a palette knife. I remember now. And this is almost too red here. I got to put a little blue in there too. Throw a little blue in there. Let's spray it again really quickly. One more shot. That's probably all I have to spray it. You notice how it doesn't do anything? It just keeps it wet. Isn't that great? Let's see. Did I miss any questions? If I missed a question up on top, it'll kind of come down. So ask again. If I miss a question ever, just go ahead and ask again. And now I'm just going to go in here and get some texture. Bonnie from Toronto today, she showed us how to use saran wrap to put on leaves. We're going to do some of that. I'm going to try it first, saran wrap, and use it like a brush. And she brushed a bunch of her bushes and make foliage with them. So that was really cool. It was a demonstration for our club today. And so I'm going to show you guys. I'm going to try it first, but we're going to see. Maybe next week we can add a little bit of that. I'm very anxious to see what you guys do with this. I hope you guys all do the soft edged. Really test yourself. Now the boat here, the little boats and thing, I can't do the soft edge because it will just bleed all over. And so I want to make them a little bit more, let's see, maybe I can. Let's see if we can do this. I'll make them a little bit thicker. And so this will be the boats. I put little kayaks in here. You can do that if you want. You don't have to. I just thought it's nice to put a little bit of something in there. You don't. Again, this is more about doing this and studying how to do soft edges. It will look fine. I just thought putting people in there just always gives it a little bit of life. It's up to you. All right, and so now while this is because that's pretty much all I would do, and then I would put in maybe this a little dark here. This is still wet. Let me put a little bit of this. Actually, starting to dry a little bit, but that's okay if I get a little bit in there. Just going to get a little bit of the edges here of the reflection. Again, if it's damp, you're done. You know, don't go in when it's damp. So let me just show you what I would do to my other painting here. So here where I didn't get dark enough, and let's say it's dry now, and I'm going to put this aside because the only thing I have left on this one will be to give me the people, and that's hard edged. So the soft edge is all done. It's I wanted to show you the palette knife. Oh, sorry about that. So the palette knife, or like a credit card or anything you want to rub with, I would rub away and basically try this on a separate sheet of paper if you ever want to what I'm trying to do is get the top part of the rocks light, and so I'm pushing away. I don't know if you can see this. I'm pushing away the paint. I'm pushing it downwards and getting off the top of the rock and pushing it down across the paper, and though weird thing is that these rocks in the photograph are darker than the water, but again, you don't have to do this, but I just want to show you how you can get a hard edge. You can just get the top of the rocks getting light. See, I'm just pushing away the paint and getting back to the light of the paper, and it's one way of but you need a lot of paint to do this. You need a lot of paint on there, and it's really great when you're doing wet into wet, and it'll show you that you have enough paint to get the top of the thing wet. And because you're basically taking the paint, pushing it down. Now if it's too wet, somebody had done this with a credit card, if it's too wet, it'll kind of scar the paper and make it darker. And especially if you gouge it, it'll make it a darker line. But again, you don't have to do this. This is not about, this is not the challenge. The challenge is to do the whole painting in wet into wet. So I just decided to do this one because I wanted to show them how to take enough pigment and then rub it down to get the tops of a rock light. So if you need to get the top of the rock light again. And if you don't like this, you can go back and just cover back over with the dark, re-wet it, and but it's one way of getting texture in your picture again, and showing texture in your rocks. I know we did this not too long ago, a couple weeks ago we did those rocks, and so again I'm doing it again with a palette knife, or you can do it with a credit card, old hotel room key, and so that's texture. Now let me show you what I would do. So this is the old one, right? I didn't get dark enough, definitely not dark enough, but that doesn't mean you're done. You can still go back in, and of course I took it off the board, which would be nice to have the line on there, but let me just show you. I'm going to take and re-wet this again. And you can re-wet it once it's dry, you can re-wet it again, and I'm just going to re-wet it by spraying it like this. Just going to spray it from a distance. And you can't see it because I have to keep it far enough away. And then I'm going to take my brush, and hopefully it's got a lot of clean water, and I really lightly go over the areas where I want it. Oh, it's got brown in it. Oh boy. make sure your brush is clean, and then just go over real lightly, barely touching it. I just want it to even out the wetness, and let it soak a little bit. Let it soak a little bit. See how I'm not doing anything to the painting. I just wet it. I'm going to respray it again. I just want it evenly wet again. And now I'm going to pretend like it's the first time I ever touched it. Because it is. It's like now I can go back in and it's all pre-wet. Hobby Lobby had a mist sprayer for $7.99. Awesome. Yeah, just get it there. If you get it from Amazon, please go through my site, and that way I get a little something too. All right, so what I'm going to do here now is I'm just going to go back in and pretend like I'm starting the painting again. Look at this. I can go over everything. And if I find I don't like an edge, I can also rub it a little bit and rub it out. Because it's like, it rejuvenates the paint. Like I noticed that this little yellow orange here, I can just rub that a little bit. And it's all evenly wet again. It's like I'm starting from scratch again. And it's all evenly wet. And so you just go in and get the more pigment. This time, make it darker. Make it darker right away. So you can go in a second time, but you just have to wait till it's totally dry. I'd rather you not, but hey, you know, sometimes you just don't get it dark enough right away. So try it. You know, don't give up on this painting. Just keep on doing it until you get it to where you getting soft edges. Because look at this, look at this. I'm going right into the area. It's all still like it's the first wash, right? And it was totally dry when I started this, and then I re-wet it, sprayed it. And if it's thick enough, now I can just go in there, make it a little bit darker. The clouds, I can go around the clouds and do it exactly what I did before. Exactly what I did before, just now it's like you're starting again. You're starting again, and I can just go in and make it a little bit nicer. Work it until you like it. Work it until you find you like the edge and like the clouds the way they are. You got it dark enough this time. See, I'm just kind of letting everything float. Now, if you scrub something out, you got to make sure that you cover up that area with a nice wash where it's laying flat by itself. You cannot soften the edge. Don't try to soften the edge with your thing. You have to let the pigment be thick enough and soften itself. It has to do it on its own. It's got to be wet enough that it's floating. So here I want a little bit darker clouds. Remember, I wanted darker clouds. It's like I'm working from scratch again. And look at it. I'm taking a painting that was already dry and just pre-wet it. And you can do this on any painting. You can always go back into any painting as long as you re-wet it. Now also the paper you're using, if it's really cheap paper, then it's going to lift up a little bit easier. So that's you have to watch out for. So don't brush it very hard at all. The water has to lay on top without agitating it. But I'm hoping this helps you when it comes to pre-doing or redoing a wash or redoing parts of your painting that you didn't get dark enough the first time. Because look, it looks just as clean, just as fresh, because it's nice and wet and evenly wet, right? Go back over. And the mister keeps it wet evenly. Don't put it too far away. You'll see you'll get dots. If it's too close, you have too much water. It's just got to be a mist. And it's one squirt. And it's not shooting it. You're not taking the little mister and going really close to it, because then you'll blast it, and that's too much. All right, and so here, I mean, look at that. It's just, this part's getting a little dry here. So now look at all these little parts that are really dark that I didn't get the first time. Now I can go in there and get them. You know, it's really, watercolor is wonderful. And it's so wonderful because you can get all these soft edges on their own. And now I'm teaching you how to do it after you get one done and you didn't do it right. You just go right back in, get it again, hit it again. Just let it float. Float your pigment. That's my big thing. And it really does work. It works so well if you float your pigment. Here I'm going to take some dark clouds, put some dark clouds through here this time. Make it a little bit darker. Just this cloud itself is all darker. It's all wet into wet. Wet into wet. So by next week, I want everybody to be able to do wet into wet. So that anytime I say you get a soft edge, you're going to know what to do. You're going to do exactly this, wet into wet. You're going to do the background of that last week's painting. You're going to do it again. And you're going to get it really wet this time. And you're going to do soft edges. You're going to make branches that are wet. Here I'm making clouds that are soft edged. And it's very wet. It's in a wet wash. You got to keep it wet. Because even that thing last week, I could have put masking fluid down on some parts like last week for the stems and stuff, and then just do these big wet washes of the background, keeping it out of focus. Can you tell I'm excited about this for you guys? This is going to be cool. Now let's see how many of you do this. And for those that are on my Facebook page, a couple of you guys, I'm really expecting a lot from Mark. Mark, you gotta do this soft edge. I'm gonna see it. No hard edges at all, Mark. He's usually not on, I think, today, or during the actual thing. But I think he does watch it, and he does do it. He's in my Facebook group from around Winona. And so let's get down here. Look at, I'm even making my dark clouds here. So a painting that was nothing, now suddenly I'm getting more darks in there. It's starting to, getting the dark pattern through here. I can make this part was not dark enough either. I'll go back in, wet that. It's not wet right now, but I go back in there. So again, you can go back in. Everybody says you can't go back in watercolor, right? Yes, you can. You definitely can. You just gotta make sure that it's all nice and wet and evenly wet, like you're working your first wash again. It's all possible. There it is. See how I'm just, if it's always the same thing you're doing, you're always doing wet into wet. And this you can even do. This is how you work everything in watercolor. Even when you do, like, let's say you do an apple. If I do an apple, and let's just turn this around. If I do an apple, and I'm doing the outer edge hard, right? If you do an apple like this, the outer edge is hard, right? And so then you fill it in, and what's happening on the inside now? Now it's all wet into wet. And then you keep all this part wet until you get it to where you want make it look like an apple. This is all now wet into wet. The outer side is hard, right? But inside that edge is wet into wet. And then you can sculpt it. You can make one side darker, one side lighter. Get the little, divot in here. You can do all that because you know now how to make a soft edge and you know how let things float. It'll be very much that you're then sculpting the whole apple. Maybe it looks like a peach, who knows. And get some nice red in here. Look at this. Oh my gosh, look how much paint is in there. Make it soft. It's like you're sculpting. It's like you're sculpting the edge. And here we have a little, see? So you can do it like an apple because inside is always wet and wet. Everything you do in watercolor is what we're just doing right here. Wet into wet is how you do everything. It doesn't matter if it's a hard edge or a soft edge. Inside that hard edge is wet into wet. And so you have to know how much pigment to put in to get it to do its own thing. All right. Any more questions here? They would explode. Tina asked how I would do 140 on plexiglass. It's the same thing, identical to this, what we're doing right now. And you have to, and when you're doing it on plexiglass, you just have to watch it that it always stays wet. It's the exact same thing. It'll stay nice and flat because it's on plexiglass. So let me, so there's your apple. I'll put that on the back of that one. Now back to this one, and see now it's all dry, and we got all nice stuff happening here. Now if I go in, I can get hard edges. Once it's all dry, you can go back to your normal self and start doing your wet into wet or wet and dry. Get all your hard edges. If I feel like I need to have this hard edge then later, but just try to do the whole thing first all wet. You just try to get that kind of feel to it. And then if you got to go a second time to get the feel more of the light stuff. And you can even rub out. Like if I want to rub out areas to make it a soft edge, that's fine too. But now once you get it dry, when it's slowly dry and you feel like you want to put the hard edges in, go ahead, and stuff. But maybe take a picture of it before you get it to where you do the hard edges. Because I could probably see what you did in soft edged. But then just show me a shot. Take a shot of it when you have it down where all your soft edges are done. Then take a shot and then go ahead and like right now what I'm going to do just to finish this one off really quickly is just to put the people in. And that's all hard edged. That's all just going to go in here. I'm just going to put these people in here real quick. And we're going to, I just do the big parts and they're basically silhouetted against a light surface. So I'll make them any color at first. I'll just put it in there. And then I'll make it darker and more colorful as I go along here. Just holding on to that. Get the arm. Got some blue jeans on. How much should we get? 2 minutes. Got a paddle here. Of course, all my ladies get red hair. There we go. And then we put let's see, some dark paddle she's holding. And then reflection into the water, because it's right by the water. So look at, there's some reflection I put in there. And I'm just making this part up. If you need to make it up, you can look at, go Google something, like people doing something, then you can put that in there. Here's the boat. I'll do the side of the boat real quick. And then again, too, I can just make this up. If you can't make it up, find an image of it and then put that into your... And so I'm just going to put a little bit of shadow into the water too. Here's the same thing on this side. Your boat is a little bit darker on the edge right here. Negative painting that boat. This is the kind of thing I used to make up all the time. I can make this up because I was an illustrator for TV storyboards, so I can make anything up out of my head. But if you can't, don't be afraid to just go on Google and type it in and get a picture of it and then draw it in. Or don't even put anything in there. Just do it as landscaping. That's fine too. All right, guys, that's it. Let me take this off and we're done. Any last questions? I've done it, wetting both sides and laying it on my desk. No plexiglass needed. Yeah, you really don't need plexiglass. You can lay it on even these boards. I use these sign boards, that political boards. They do have ridges, but if you wet both sides, you can just lay it on there. Actually, don't do it on a board like this because it does show the ridges. Then if it's 140, not 300 pound, but 140 will show the ridges of this board. But like gator board or foam board, you can put it on there, and it'll stay pretty wet. And also, the thing is, or put it on plexiglass, and then that keeps it wet because it doesn't. There's no air gets in between the board. So there you have this evening's, and here you have this afternoon's, which hopefully you got a little bit better, but it still needs a little bit darker. Still needs to be a little bit darker in there, and even the mountain needs to be a little bit darker. But that's all possible still by just re-wetting it. So I hope you guys understand wet in the wet. Please do it wet in the wet. Please try it and let us see. I'm so excited about seeing this. And so show me the wet in the wet. Don't show me the... you can take two shots. Actually show us one with the hard edge after you get it done with the soft edge, and then show me the soft edge and hard edge. All right? So until next Thursday. And I'm not sure what we're doing next Thursday, but worry about this first. All right? So until next Thursday, we'll see you then, guys.